Good morning. This is Ron. It is Monday, March the 12th. Welcome to Storytime. So today I'm going to again, like part five, I believe, of the deficiencies of right-wing talk radio. One of the things I want to clarify too about why it is that I spend more time talking about the deficiencies of the people on the right versus criticizing the people on the left is that it is my contention that if the people on the right had their act together, we wouldn't have any people on the left. That socialism would be basically occupying the same place that the Ku Klux Klan and the Nazi Party do in this country. They're politically irrelevant. And socialism should be, at this particular point, completely and utterly irrelevant. The Soviet Union is gone. The East Bloc countries, our former communist countries, are gone. Venezuela is tearing itself apart with its new socialism. Cuba is absolutely desperately poor. Any quasi communist country that wants to do well is either part communist, part capitalist, i.e., free market, or moving towards a free market economy, such as Vietnam and China. The ones that are hardcore about it, North Korea, Venezuela, etc., suffer, and the people suffer there tremendously. So, but it is the ineptness, the incompetence of people on the right, commentators, column writers, and radio talk show hosts that help to aid and abet the left and keep them in power and keep them as a source of influence, if you will, in American society today. And that if the right would simply get its act together, know exactly who it is that they're fighting, how they're fighting, and take the appropriate measures, again, socialism would be dead in this country. That's all that really needs to happen. Um, some of the things that the more of the things that right wing talk radio misses is the philosophical theories of determinism, materialism, and skepticism. And the way they miss it, for instance, in the case of skepticism, which is what's number one, they miss it because looking at environmentalism, and they fail to recognize that the intellectual or actually psychological underpinning of environmentalism and environmental law is skepticism, the theory, the contradiction that nothing can be known with certainty. So therefore, we have to act in a superstitious manner. And also, what you'll see, or if you listen to somebody on the radio, and they make any type of a statement of certainty, that they're certain, particularly if it's a moral certainty, you're inevitably going to get the caller that's going to call up and that's going to start asking, isn't it true questions. Well, you said blah, blah, blah. Isn't it true that? And then they will provide, let's say you come out and say Hillary Clinton is a criminal and she should be convicted and put in prison. Inevitably, somebody's going to call you up and say, well, isn't it true that so and so on the Republican or so and so on the right did the same thing or did nearly the same thing? And what they want you to do here, and what they're attacking, is not your statement per se about whether or not Hillary Clinton is guilty, about whether or not Hillary Clinton should go to jail, but the very fact that you're certain. If you had gone ahead and made the statement in a different way, if you had said, in my opinion, you qualified it, or said the way it looks now, or and use some other type of qualifying statement, you're not going to get those people calling you up. But that's why they're calling you up. That's what they're trying to train you to do, because they want everybody to do it. And the purpose of that is that it, in a manner of speaking, opens your mind, right? If you have definitive attitude about ultimately about capitalism and socialism. I'm a capitalist. Capitalism is right. Socialism is wrong. Well, if they can get you, train you not to think in terms of absolutes, but think in terms of uh, in a subjective manner, that reality, they're trying to get you away from the idea that reality exists and get you into an idea that reality is a personal issue and that everybody expressing themselves should express themselves in a personal way, in my opinion, or otherwise qualify their statements. In my opinion, capitalism is better than socialism, is a lot different than saying capitalism is right, socialism is wrong. Capitalism is productive, socialism is destructive. You can hear the difference and feel the difference. The psychological impact that those statements have are completely different. In my opinion, or the way it looks today, or what I've seen so far, there's a lot of ways where you hear that if you listen carefully, that talk show hosts have allowed themselves to be trained by people on the left to do things they really shouldn't be doing. Because when you get down to it, capitalism is about things intellectual and about convincing people what's right. It is based on objectivity, reality, certainty, and morality. What is right, what is wrong, and convincing through argument, producing evidence and enough evidence to create a to convince somebody that you're right and that they're wrong. Whereas socialism is imaginary and psychologistic. It's manipulative and it has a tendency to bully and intimidate. And that's the way it goes. If you're, that's one of the essentials that you really got to remember at all times. Whenever you're dealing with somebody on the left, you can expect to be getting psychologistic treatments. I can't even say arguments because they're not arguments. They're just trying to get in your psyche and train you to do things in a different way, train you to look at things in a different way. When you concede the point, when you start talking about, well, in my opinion, you are conceding not only that there is no universal rights and wrongs, but you're conceding that nothing can be known with certainty, and you're conceding subjectivity. You are saying, yes, I agree with you that life is inherently psychologistic, that there is no objectivity, and therefore you start communicating that way. And when you do that, you aid and abet the left, because ultimately what they want you to do is to be not so sure about capitalism, right? Open the door to accepting socialism. Capitalism is better than socialism. Well, isn't it true that? Is a statement you're going to get. And that's a leading question. And the best way to handle it, whenever you're getting somebody's coming at you with a skeptical argument, for lack of a better term, the best way to handle it is with certainty. Continue to be certain. Isn't it true that? No, it isn't. Because you've got to remember what they're doing is they're asking you to take their word for it. Taking somebody's word for it is the oldest fallacy in the book. Okay? You got to come up with proof. Isn't it true that so and so did XYZ? No. Are you sure? Yes. And now you're going to put them in the position where they get one of two choices: quit the argument or come over to the bright side, the sun side, and start making convincing intellectual arguments. I'm not afraid to be wrong as an individual, as the only true conservative in the country. I'm not afraid to be wrong. If I'm wrong, and you can show me, you can demonstrate with evidence and proof, I'm willing to admit I'm wrong. Because once I've been shown to be wrong, I've learned something. I don't want to continue doing things or acting in a way that's counterproductive. I want to learn, and I want to do things in a way that is good for me. And if there's a way that's better than what I'm doing, I want to know about it. What I don't want is for you to manipulate me. I don't want you to psychologically bully or intimidate me. That I don't want. And that's what I'm going to do is take a stand. That's where I'm going to take the stand and um, in a position where you have to choose. You can either make an intellectual argument or you can pack your bags and go home, so to speak. So that's basically that's if again listen to Rush Limbaugh, listen to Sean Hannity, and you'll hear it when they have callers. And sometimes with Sean Hannity, he puts people on the radio where he has his 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock, his last hour, and it's called a shootout or shoot around or something like that, where he has a liberal and a conservative sit and debate each other about some particular topic. And if you listen to the so-called liberal and the way they're handling the conversation, it's not they're not out to convince people. You'll notice that they're out to use psychologistic tactics, tools, and techniques to intimidate, to bully, and to manipulate. The classic example of that is pushing Granny down the stairs. They have done that many times when they want, let's say, increases in welfare spending or increases in Social Security or something, or when they think the Republicans are out to privatize Social Security. Instead of coming out and making a rational argument and saying, well, it is wrong because we don't, here's the money situation, this is how it's going to affect seniors if you give it, or even better is to say it is the responsibility of the government and therefore we should not give it to the private sector. Instead of doing that, then they got to run their commercials about pushing Granny down the stairs and that how the Republicans are not compassionate. I remember there was once a left-wing commentator from Texas, Molly Ivins, and she used to refer to Republicans as being meaner than a frying pan full of rattlesnakes. So, and too many times the Republicans go for it, and they shouldn't. Should ignore it. And so then determinism, you're going to find, is always used as the bottom, the underneath, the foundational justification for government involvement in more and more and more parts of our lives. The first argument that you're going to hear from the left via determinism is an argument along the lines of who in their right mind? Who in their right mind would do this? Who in their right mind would do that? And what they're trying to convince you is that people are forced to do what they do. They have no free will. They can't help it. The homeless, and there was somebody that made this argument a few decades ago. Hey, who in their right mind would live on the street and never bathe and not take care of themselves? Who in their right mind would do that? Okay, so what they're doing is laying the foundation for determinism, saying these people, if assuming that they are not insane, are obviously forced, and even if they are, you can make the argument that insanity is a form of force, is a power that forces these people to live on the street. And so, government must get involved as a counter force to force these people off the street, either into treatment or into some type of temporary housing or shelters until they can be forced back into the mainstream of society. So that's always the classic argument where homelessness is concerned. But any type of government, another classic is smoking and anti-smoking efforts. Okay. They used to say, who in the right mind would use a product when used as directed causes illness and death? Somebody actually made that statement once. And again, what they're saying is the only reason people smoke is because they're forced to. They're forced to because the big tobacco companies, and it always has to be big because, again, we're talking about powers beyond your control. So the big tobacco companies have to, or the big tobacco companies force people to smoke because they want to make a profit. That the big tobacco companies really don't care about people or anyone's health. They see an opportunity to make a profit, and so they're going to force people to do it, usually via advertising. So therefore, the government must get involved. We must have a goal of having a smoke-free society. We must restrict ever more, every year, all the time, restrict, where smoking can occur, and smokers can congregate to smoke. And also, of course, on the other side, restricting big tobacco from advertising so that they can't force new people into smoking. So that's determinism and skepticism. And then you have materialism. And materialism is not just about, it can be kind of, the right wing has a tendency to talk about materialism and being, when they're talking about spirituality and being Christian and not being always concerned about the almighty dollar. But there's another part to materialism. Materialism is also the theory on the left that the only thing that exists, the only thing that matters, are things that you can touch and feel. And feel is important because that involves your emotions. That concepts and abstractions simply do not exist and don't matter. That all you have is words. So you throw around a bunch of words, and that the words only matter in terms of their psychological impact on people, but that they have no meaning beyond that, or any type of relevance, which is not absolutely not true. We're a conceptual and a abstract. We like to conceptualize and abstract, and we form ever more complex chains of abstractions and concepts because it helps one to think, to make better decisions. Otherwise, if you don't conceptualize, then what you're doing is, this is what Ayn Rand referred to as the perceptual mentality, or the perceptual level of consciousness is materialism. Okay, you're being materialistic, then what you're basically saying is the only thing that exists is that which I perceive or feel. I see the dog that exists, this couch. Some materialists even go so far as to say that the only things that you can really be sure exist are those things that you can actually feel with your fingers, that are tactile. That even what you see is a doubt. And all of this goes way back 2,000 years, when there were some Greeks that were talking about that our senses are untrustworthy. And one of the demonstrations they used was taking a piece of wood or a stick, and putting it in a pool of water. And if you put a stick in a pool of water, it looks like it's bent. They said, aha, see, the perception doesn't match reality. But what you don't realize is we understand that. We know we have conceptualized, abstracted the issue, and we know that the reason that the stick looks bent is because of various physical laws, refraction, that have to do with light and whatnot. And that's what makes the stick look crooked. And we know that the stick isn't crooked. There is no conflict there. It is a mild, you know, um, distraction, diversion, whatever. But we know the difference. That's the point. And in those rare cases when you're getting into things that are more complicated than a stick in a water, and we think we know, let's say in the case of the Earth is flat. That's what we knew. Until we had solid evidence and proof that the Earth was spherical. And then we were able to say, aha, we were wrong. The Earth is spherical. And the people that today, there's a Flat Earth Society. And the Flat Earth Society are basically materialist. In other words, they are the perceptual level of mentality. The reason people used to think the earth was flat was you looked at the horizon. If you go out to the beach and you look at the horizon, it looks flat. It looks like if you go far enough, you're just going to drop off the edge of the earth. But it isn't. It's also an optical illusion. But there are people today that remain materialistic and that, again, look at the horizon, say, what I see, what I perceive with my eyes must be real. And that concepts and abstractions, there was the first people that started thinking that the earth was round were people that noticed that about ships coming in from the ocean and how they would appear. You first see the top of the mast, and then more of the mast, and then more of the sails, and then finally the boat itself comes into view, and that's the way they said, aha, it's a spherical situation. And there's those people that can't deal with that concept, that abstraction, and so they stick with what's perceived, that the horizon looks flat, therefore the earth is flat. And that's what they're going to stick with. So if you run into any of those kinds of things, those are the things that really have to be refuted. And if Republicans, if conservatives had spent more time over the past 30, 40, 50 years refuting the underlying psychologistic tactics and techniques of the left, again, we would have destroyed socialism a long time ago. One of the things new to socialism like and get into socialism for is power, because they're promised empowerment, that they can use psychology and psychologistic tools and techniques to manipulate people, to get them to do what they want. And they're very often successful at it, and they shouldn't be. Tomorrow, I'm going to be reading another chapter, chapter 9, from Ayn Rand's book, which is Philosophy, Who Needs It? And until then, thank you for joining me, and have a great day.